Welcome to today's podcast. Today we have Tony Lingham from Anatoc University, and Tony's a real expert on organizational behavior, particularly in the leadership field, and has done a lot of work in the area between individual and team learning. And Tony, when I look at organizations, there's always this issue within organizations of the individual and the team, particularly on the motivation side, because how do we motivate the individual? How do we motivate the team distinct from the individual? How do they come together? As well as the learning, how do we create the team as a system so that all the people add to the knowledge base and the capability of the team as well as the individual? So it seems to me that when I look at individual and team learning, there's perhaps a real issue with trying to balance the two out. And I understand that you have studied this extensively and you've got a number of metrics as well as you've done some research on those metrics. So you've come up with some tools to help organizations balance and create an individual and team learning and development approach such that we have high performance organizations. Can you give us a little sense of these tools, these assessments that you've developed, and in particular, how you've tested them so that we know they actually work?
James, those are good questions. Actually, when I first started off working with individuals and teams, and when I was doing my doctoral thesis way back when, I've always been interested in helping organizations develop better interpersonal interactions and better team interactions, primarily because no one really works alone anymore. Most people are constantly working in teams, whether it's in the real physical world or in the virtual world, or a blend of both. People are constantly working together, and there's a high need for us to really understand when people are engaging with you. How do you know what will help them, motivate them, inspire them to feel valued and appreciated while working with you or with anyone who has this knowledge? So what I've done was actually to develop two instruments, one at the individual level, which also moves toward the interpersonal level, and then the other is a team level. I call them learning inventories. So that the individual instrument is called the Learning Needs Inventory, and that's based on the motivational need of individuals. And what we do is, what we've done is to actually look at when people are engaging in a work context. So if suppose someone were to say something like, we've had enough of discussions, this is not getting us anywhere, can we move forward with our task? So how people frame things, we tend not to pay attention to that, but if we do, we not only understand why they are framing the things the way they frame it, but also what's important to them based on their framing. So my earlier example of someone saying, can we stop these discussions, it's going nowhere, can we move ahead with our task, is someone who is very action oriented. So a lot of discussions tend to bring in more information, and the information doesn't motivate that person. That's why they have that reaction. And so based on that, I did a whole assessment. We did 7 months to really create the items themselves, tested it across the nation and then in different parts of the world, so as to be able to establish, for those of you who are research oriented, to establish that the survey I have is not only just reliable, but valid and robust across different cultures and countries. So that's how I operate. I tend to make sure all my instruments are really solid and robust and valid before I put it out to help others. So the Learning Needs Inventory basically is talking about 4 fundamental needs that drive people when they work together as part of a team or project. And the 4 underlying motivational needs are the need for information, the need for clarity, a need for parameters, and a need for action. And so what we have are things like when you hear someone say, can we just move on, these discussions are not useful, that's someone which has a high need for action. If someone were to say something like, could we revisit our objectives for this task, I want to make sure that we're on the right track, is someone who is really interested in making sure things are clear for them. And if another person say, could we see what's available online so we are aware of what is out there, that's a person who really has a high need for information. And of course, there's another person who would say, I'm not sure I totally understand why we are doing this project. What is our purpose? What are we expected to do? So those are people who are driven by parameters. So the idea behind this is individuals are not motivated by one of these underlying motivational needs, but rather a profile of the combination of the four. So what I do is I actually profile the individual based on their underlying motivational learning needs, and they can see their profile, and we have 15 different combinations to help people understand what they are motivated by, why they say things the way they do. And what I've done is also to have people do their learning needs assessment. We have a coaching session with them, and then they introduce themselves to the team members again, but with their motivational learning needs as the highlight of how they introduce themselves. And what's really fascinating is people would end up saying things like, wow, so now I know why you are always being such, always pushing for action. Now we understand it's not that you're trying to be difficult, but it's really something that motivates you. And so when we start engaging with people with that kind of knowledge, what happens is that you create a space where people feel appreciated, they feel heard, they feel valued, and as a result, we would increase the level of engagement at the individual and interpersonal levels. So that's the individual level assessment. We also, with the individual level assessment, assess their tendencies in terms of innovation and execution. The reason why we moved into that direction, of course, is also that we are very much in an innovation economy. And that shift has come up with has caused a lot of different ideas to be floating around in the world, such as design thinking, creativity, innovation, because organizations now have to really learn how to innovate in order to thrive and survive in our constantly changing context. So we believe that if we help individuals understand their tendencies, we can also coach them to be better at innovation and better at execution at the individual level. So that's what we do at the individual level, and I just want to check in with you if I'm moving in the direction that you're asking those questions about.
Tony, based on what you were saying, I imagine there's huge implications in terms of organizational culture. You mentioned an innovative culture, but I'm also thinking in terms of leadership, compensation, some of the tools that the organization might supply to an individual who is looking for different kinds of motivation. Does your assessment tools also have implications for, I would call it, the environment that the team and the organization is in? Do you also speak to that?
Absolutely, James. The reason is a lot of team development, leadership training programs, they focus on, let's just focus on the teams. When you look at teams and they are given team training, they go out of the organization and they go through either some team bonding exercises in nature, or if they are taught how to do decision making or how to design a team, it is not really embedded in the work context. What I do and what we do really is that we look at teams in their work context. So it's very relevant to them. We assess their experience of teamwork within that work context they're in. And in that assessment, we assess the actual team experience they have, or the quality of engagement they have, and also the desired engagement they would like to have. So based on scientific change theories, this is more like assessing the state one of a team that aligns with chaos or complexity theories. And once we assess the state one of the team in their work context, we can actually coach them toward their desired state. And when they are moved into the desired state, we do a time two assessment to see where they have moved. Now, in terms of chaos and complexity theory, we cannot really see what state two is going to be until we assess them at state two in terms of the actual and desired. And that's what exciting about working with teams in their work context. Teams in their work context deal with a lot of variables, a lot of forces that impact them. And to be able to see the state one of a team and then to coach them and to assess them in state two, you would uncover not only how the team is evolving, but also what forces might be shifting the team as well at the larger level, systems level. And because we focus on the work context of a team, what we try to do is to help them realize that teams are actually engines that drive businesses. They are the force that bring innovations to life, and they are a central form of organizing of all work relationships. So basically what we do is when we help a team develop using our coaching model, we not only focus on the team, but also how the team can affect the larger system. So a really good team really influences the organization or the higher system, and not just getting things done as dictated to them or told that they should complete this task, but they would rather want to influence the organization itself. So that's what, in terms of implications for organizations. Not only do we focus on the teams, but we also focus on how the teams can influence the organization or the larger system in ways that would help shape the organizations moving forward, especially in such a volatile environment where, even if you ask a lot of CEOs now, a five-year strategic plan is difficult to ascertain because things are changing so quickly. As a result, it's also good for us at the team level to know how to contribute to those shifts as they go along. So that's the team level assessment, and that's why we also focus on innovation and execution, because it's not just about helping a team develop better quality of engagement, but also to help them innovate and execute and contribute to the organization.
So, Tony, this description that you have in terms of engagement and contribution, it sounds as if that teams fall somewhere along a spectrum of engagement and contribution to the organization. Can you just give us a sense of what the team is like, or its profile at the lowest level of capability, and what it looks like at the highest level of capability?
I think that's an excellent question. When you look at the spectrum in terms of how we are looking at a team, at the lowest end, if you will, is the quality of the engagement. And the quality of the engagement can fall into four different major dimensions that based on our research. One is the non-task dimension, interactions around that. The task dimensions, the power and influence dimensions, and the openness dimension. So whenever we do this work with organizations and we ask people to talk about a time when they were really working in a team that was great and exciting, and when they're working with a team that's not so exciting and they probably don't want to work with that team ever again, what ends up showing up when you ask them to identify the characteristics, they will still fall into those four major dimensions. So when you look at teams at the lower level, you're helping them develop better non-task interactions, which is more the interpersonal relationships, individuality, whether they are in a team, and whether they listen effectively. And then there's a task aspect, which is, do they plan when they have meetings? Do they have an agenda, a plan in terms of how to get a task done? Very much in terms of project management tools that we are very familiar with, and also whether they actually get things done, and if they understand the purpose of why their team exists in the organization. So those are sort of the lower level of the spectrum, if you will. Toward the sort of midpoint level is when we look at the ability of the team to influence the organization. And what I mean by that is, being an engineer in the past, we are taught to be team leaders as folks who would drive the team to do what they're supposed to do, and we do the project management tools in order to make sure the task gets done. In my research, what is really fascinating and counterintuitive is that really good team leaders create the environment and groom the team to be able to influence and affect the task and not just complete it. So that's a whole different take on what team leadership really means. So team leadership is not, team leaders are not someone who would tell you, okay, we have our meeting on Monday morning, how are things going, and are there any delays or whatever in terms of project management. It's not. It's developing and grooming team members to come to the point where they are comfortable and confident enough to say to the team leader, you know what, although we are given this task, this may be a much better way to do it, and let's push that and see what happens. And that is taking into account the organizational need and not just a task. So that's the midpoint. And then toward the higher end of the spectrum is when teams have the ability to look at ideas, shape ideas in ways that they collapse and shape and mold ideas into possibilities. And these possibilities will then transfer into more new innovative ideas that could help the organization, even if the organization is not seeing that yet. And I think that's the highest level of team effectiveness in an organization. So if I were to revisit the spectrum, we're looking at helping a team evolve and get better in its quality of engagement based on the 4 dimensions. Moving into the level where teams start realizing that effective teams are those that actually influence the organization and not just get things done. And then finally, the higher level of team development is where teams are aware that they can have ideas and possibilities that have not been talked about or not even discussed yet to help influence the organization move to the next level that is probably not even in the vision. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. I like this idea of creating possibilities for the organizations as we look into an evolving environment organizations find themselves in. It seems that the ability to create possibilities suggests to me that the ability to help shape our future. Tony, as we close our podcast for today, do you have any takeaways for either our colleagues in the university or our colleagues in practitioner who are looking to implement such ideas?
Absolutely. I think as researchers, frankly, in organizational behavior and business and in management, both in research and practice, researchers are more now scholar practitioners or engaged scholars. So there's a blend of both research and practice. From a research standpoint, I would say that when we are developing any kind of assessment, it is really critical that we use measurement theory, concepts of evaluations and testing an instrument with all the rigor and standards of rigor around it to ensure that what we are going to be putting out as an assessment is valid, robust, and tested across the world, which is what we did. It is really good to do that as a scholar, so that when you are actually bringing your instruments or your ideas out into the world, it's meaningful and relevant and timely. And I think that would be a focus of academics looking at developing instruments to help organizations. From the practitioner point of view, it really boils down to, so what can we do with this? And so the way I'm looking at what we do is, when we do training programs for individuals and teams, we should not dissect and separate individual, interpersonal, and team level training. They should all be interrelated. Looking at helping an individual develop more self-awareness, which is a very strong push in a lot of training programs, but it's not so strong a push in terms of other awareness. And so the combination of self and other awareness, when they're engaging in the work environment, does promote a far better, healthy interaction space in the environment context. So developing those skills to have a high level of self-awareness and with that, a high level of other awareness would help your team members and your employees not just look at themselves, but rather how they're interacting with others. At the same time, once that interpersonal level awareness is reached, it's really good to move on to the team level, because ultimately, from a practitioner standpoint, everything works, everything moves at the team level. Most of the engagement in organizations happen at the team level. And so if you shift the capacity of a team, you're basically overall, all the teams that are working in the organization get shifted to a much higher level engagement type team. What you essentially is doing is shifting the entire organization, but looking at the right place, which is where teams are, because teams, every organizations are based on a team structure from the board all the way down to ad hoc teams. Teams are everywhere now. And if we start focusing on looking at developing teams in a way that you can actually measure where they are now, coach them, and measure them again to see where they are then at the new state, is really helpful, not just from a organizational leadership standpoint, from a consulting standpoint. And that way, consultants can have meaningful results for the organization, even if it be from training, interpersonal, individual, and teams, but where it's relevant to the work context. And I think that's the most significant takeaway. I think that practitioners who want to realize that most training, if it's not related to the actual work context, it's difficult to really develop new skills and apply new skills unless it's really linked and taken from the work context. Am I making sense to those two aspects?
Absolutely. I can understand that sense of tailoring it to what's going on in the work environment. So I want to thank you, Tony. We've been speaking today with Tony Lingham of Anatok University. And that's the end of our podcast. Thank you very much, Tony.
Thank you, James, for taking time to speak with me.
Okay.